The howling wind rattled the windows of Maple Creek Diner as Emma Collins wiped down the counter for the fifth time that hour. Outside Burlington, Vermont had disappeared under a veil of white, the worst blizzard in 50 years, transforming the quaint town into an Arctic wasteland. The weathered diner stood as a lone beacon of warmth in the storm, its neon sign flickering against the darkening afternoon sky. Emma paused, tucking a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear as she surveyed her empty kingdom. The vintage clock on the wall showed 4:30 p.m., but the darkness outside made it feel like midnight. Her fingers absently touched the old watch on her wrist, her father's final gift before the accident that took both her parents when she was in college. Its leather band was worn, but the timepiece itself remained impeccable, much like the standards Emma maintained in her modest diner. The radio in the corner droned on about the historic nature of the storm, warning people to stay indoors. The National Weather Service is calling this the worst blizzard to hit Vermont in 50 years. The announcer's voice crackled through static. All roads north of Montpelier are now closed, and Governor Williams has declared a state of emergency for Chittenden County. Emma turned down the volume. She knew the risks well enough. The question was whether to close early and brave the 3-block walk to her small apartment above the town's only bookstore, or wait out the worst of the storm here. The diner had a small cot in the office for emergencies. Tonight certainly qualified. William Winters, a 78-year-old regular with kind eyes and a spine curved by decades of hard work, nursed his coffee in the corner booth. He was the only customer who had braved the elements today, walking his usual 3 blocks despite the weather conditions that had shut down the rest of the town. "You should close up, Emma," he called out, his voice weathered but warm. "This storm's getting worse by the minute. Even the plows have stopped running." Emma smiled but shook her head. "Not yet, Mr. Winters. Someone might need shelter on a night like this." William chuckled softly. "Always thinking of others, just like your grandmother used to do." He had known Emma's family for decades, had watched her grow up during summer visits to Burlington before tragedy made the town her permanent home. "Grandma Rose taught me well," Emma replied, refilling his cup with the last of the fresh coffee. "No charge for this one. Consider it hazard pay for being my only customer." As if summoned by her words, the front door burst open with a violent gust of snow and frigid air. Emma turned, expecting to see the usual plow driver, stopping for coffee, but instead found an elderly woman stumbling through the entrance. She was bundled in a coat far too thin for the weather, silver hair dusted with snowflakes, her face pale with cold. Despite the disheveled appearance, Emma immediately noticed the Irma's handbag clutched in her gloved hands, and the glint of a substantial diamond ring signs that this was no ordinary lost traveler. "Oh my goodness!" Emma rushed forward, catching the woman as she swayed. "Are you all right?" "I got lost," the woman murmured, her voice trembling with cold but carrying an unmistakable refinement. "My taxi dropped me at the wrong address. I can't find my son's building in this storm." Emma guided her to the nearest booth. "Mr. Winters, could you turn up the heat? I'll get some hot tea." Within minutes, Emma had wrapped the woman in the emergency blanket she kept under the counter and placed a steaming mug of chamomile tea between her trembling hands. The woman's color slowly returned as warmth penetrated her chilled body. "Thank you, dear." "I'm Catherine Reynolds," the woman said, her blue eyes sharp with intelligence despite her physical fragility. "Emma Collins, you picked a rough day to get lost in Burlington," she replied, sliding into the booth across from her. "Where were you trying to go? Maybe I can help." Catherine sipped her tea, her hands steadying. "My son lives here. Lakeside Manor Apartment 3201. Emma's eyebrows rose involuntarily. Lakeside Manor was the most exclusive address in Burlington, a sleek glass tower of luxury condos overlooking Lake Champlain. Whoever Catherine's son was, he wasn't hurting for money. "That's quite a distance from here, especially in this weather," Emma said gently. "The roads to that part of town might be closed until morning." Catherine's shoulders slumped slightly. "I should have called him first, but I wanted to surprise him." A shadow crossed her face. "It's been 5 years since I've seen him. His birthday is in 3 days. Something in the woman's voice, regret, longing, hope, struck a chord with Emma. She knew about broken relationships and the courage it took to try and mend them. 5 years is a long time," Emma said carefully. "That must be difficult." "My son is not an easy man," Catherine replied with a small, sad smile. "After his father died, something changed. He built walls, pushed people away. Even me." Her voice softened. Especially me. Mr. Winters rose from his booth, buttoning his coat. I better head home before my street becomes impassable. You ladies stay safe. He nodded to Catherine. You're in good hands with our Emma. Best heart in Burlington. After he left, Emma busied herself making fresh coffee and heating homemade soup for Catherine. The woman's eyes followed her movements around the diner. You own this place? Catherine asked. Emma laughed softly. Just manage it, though. Sometimes I pretend it's mine. She ladled steaming chicken noodle soup into a bowl. I always wanted my own restaurant. It's charming, Catherine said, glancing around at the worn but clean surroundings. The diner had seen better days, but Emma kept it spotless, the red vinyl booths gleaming, the chrome fixtures polished to a shine. It pays the bills, Emma replied, setting the soup before Catherine. And I like the people. Everyone has a story. Catherine studied her with those sharp blue eyes. And what's your story, dear? A smart, thoughtful young woman like you. Shouldn't you be running your own place by now? Before Emma could answer, the radio on the counter crackled with the financial news segment. The announcer discussed market volatility and its impact on tech stocks. Emma reached to turn it off, but not before muttering under her breath about misrepresentation in the quarterly reports of a prominent tech company. Catherine caught the comment, her eyes narrowing with interest. You follow the markets. Emma hesitated, then shrugged. I dabble. Old habit. That wasn't dabbling, dear. That was the analysis of someone who understands financial reporting. Emma's smile faltered slightly. Life took some unexpected turns. She smoothed her apron, avoiding Catherine's gaze. But that's ancient history. The howling wind outside intensified and the diner's lights flickered ominously. Emma glanced at the window, now completely opaque with snow. The weather report had warned this would be the worst storm in decades, but it was exceeding even those dire predictions. I should call my son, Catherine murmured. He'll be worried if he checks his security cameras and sees I've not made it to his building. Emma raised an eyebrow. Security cameras? Michael is cautious about his privacy, Catherine explained. He has the building notify him of visitors. Emma handed her the diner's landline. Cell service is spotty in storms like this. Use this. Catherine dialed, her expression anxious. After several rings, she sighed. Voicemail again. She left a brief message explaining where she was, then handed the phone back to Emma. He's probably in a meeting. Michael practically lives at his office. What does he do? Emma asked, helping Catherine to a more comfortable position in the booth. He runs Reynolds Innovations, Catherine replied, a mixture of pride and sadness in her voice. Created software that revolutionized supply chain management. He was always brilliant, even as a boy. Too smart for his own good sometimes. Emma froze at the name, her hand gripping the edge of the table. Reynolds Innovations was one of the largest tech companies in the Northeast. Its CEO, Michael Reynolds, was infamous in business circles for his ruthless acquisitions and demanding leadership style. His face regularly graced the business section of newspapers, always with the same stern expression, never smiling. Your son is Michael Reynolds, she asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. Catherine nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. You've heard of him. Everyone in Vermont has heard of him, Emma said carefully. She didn't add that most of what she'd heard wasn't flattering. Ruthless, cold-hearted, impossible to work for. These were the whispers that followed Michael Reynolds' name. He wasn't always like this, Catherine said softly, as if reading Emma's thoughts. After his father died, something changed in Michael. Success became his only measure of worth. The lights flickered again, longer this time, and Emma moved to check the circuit breaker. I hope the power holds. The backup generator will keep the heat running, but not much else. Were you close to your parents? Catherine asked, changing the subject as Emma returned. Emma's expression softened with old grief. Very. They died in a car accident my sophomore year of college. Black ice on a mountain road. She busied herself wiping down an already clean counter. I was studying at Cornell, finance major. That's quite a leap from finance to food service, Catherine observed. Emma's laugh held little humor. Like I said, life takes unexpected turns. Before Catherine could press further, headlights cut through the swirling snow, outside their bright beams momentarily illuminating the diner's interior. A sleek black Audi R8 pulled up to the curb, its tires crunching through the accumulated drifts. Even in the blizzard, the vehicle announced wealth and power. Emma felt her heart rate quicken as a tall figure emerged battling against the wind as he made his way to the diner's entrance. When the door opened, she found herself face to face with Michael Reynolds. He stood in the doorway, snowflakes melting in his dark hair that was just beginning to silver at the temples, despite being only 42. His expensive Armani coat was dusted with white, and the Rolex Submariner on his wrist caught the light as he brushed snow from his shoulders. His face, so familiar from news photos, was even more striking in person, all sharp angles and intensity blue eyes. The exact shade of Catherine's, scanning the empty diner until they locked on Emma. "I'm looking for Catherine Reynolds," he said without preamble, his deep voice clipped and businesslike. "She left a message saying she was here." Emma straightened, meeting Michael Reynolds' intense gaze with practiced composure. 5 years managing a diner had taught her to handle difficult customers, and she suspected the man standing before her defined the word difficult. "Mr. Reynolds," she said calmly, "your mother is resting in the back booth." She was half frozen when she arrived. Something flickered in his eyes. Concerned perhaps it disappeared so quickly, Emma wondered if she'd imagined it. "Take me to her," he demanded, not a request, a command. Emma crossed her arms. "She's just had some soup and is warming up. I'd prefer not to disturb her right now." His eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. "Most people don't say no to me, Miss Collins, Emma Collins. And this is my diner, Mr. Reynolds, not your boardroom." For a moment they stood locked in silent confrontation. Emma could practically see the wheels turning behind those piercing blue eyes, likely calculating the fastest way to get what he wanted. She'd met men like Michael Reynolds before, men who viewed the world as a series of transactions and people as either assets or obstacles. To her surprise, he exhaled slowly and nodded once. "May I at least look in on her?" "Of course." Emma softened slightly. Despite his arrogance, he had driven through a blizzard to find his mother. That counted for something. She led him across the diner to where Catherine dozed in the corner booth, wrapped in blankets. Color returned to her cheeks. Michael's expression remained unreadable as he gazed at his sleeping mother. "She was trying to surprise you," Emma explained quietly. "Got lost in the storm. She said it's been 5 years since you've seen each other." "She didn't tell me she was coming," Michael replied, his voice equally low. "Families are complicated," Emma offered simply. "You have no idea," he murmured. A sudden crack of thunder sounded outside, startling them both. Lightning illuminated the diner for a brief second, and then the lights flickered once, twice, and died. Darkness engulfed them, broken only by the faint glow of emergency lights. "Perfect," Emma muttered, navigating her way behind the counter with the ease of someone who knew every inch of the space. She located a flashlight and clicked it on its beam, illuminating the sudden tension on Michael's face. "The backup generator should kick in for essential systems," she explained, "but the main lights are out until power's restored." "Do you need help?" Michael asked, already removing his expensive coat. Emma's flashlight beam caught his movement. Well, the CEO knows how to roll up his sleeves." "I wasn't born in a boardroom, Miss Collins," he replied dryly, revealing a tailored shirt that probably cost more than Emma's monthly rent. "Could have fooled me," she murmured. "Check the breaker panel by the back door while I find candles." 15 minutes later, they had established a warm pocket of light in the center of the diner. The gas stove still worked, providing both heat and cooking capability. Emma had lit hurricane lamps and candles, creating islands of golden light that transformed the humble space into something almost magical. Michael returned from checking on Catherine, who remained sleeping soundly. "Good." Emma handed him a steaming mug of fresh coffee. "The generator's running, the essential systems and space heaters in the back. We won't freeze, at least." Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and Emma felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. In the candlelight, Michael Reynolds looked less like the ruthless businessman she'd heard about, and more like a man, one with remarkable bone structure and eyes that reflected the flickering flames with hypnotic intensity. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for taking care of my mother." The sincerity in his voice caught Emma off guard. Anyone would have done the same. No, they wouldn't. His gaze was direct, searching. Most people would have called the emergency services and washed their hands of responsibility. You gave her your office, made her soup, tucked her in like she was family. Emma looked away, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. "I like your mother, man. She reminds me of my grandmother." They sat in silence for a moment, the howling wind outside making the warmth inside feel all the more precious. Michael's attention turned to the radio, which had switched to a discussion of a controversial merger in the tech industry. You turned it down quickly earlier, he observed. Not a fan of financial news. Emma tensed slightly. Just background noise for an empty diner. Michael took a slow sip of his coffee, his eyebrows lifting in apparent surprise at the quality. This is excellent. I get the beans from a small co-op in Colombia, Emma replied, relaxing slightly at the change of subject. They practice sustainable farming and pay their workers fairly. You know your coffee. It's my job to know. Michael set down his mug, studying her with renewed interest. And you also happen to know about quarterly financial reports and tech stocks. Emma's expression closed off. I hear things. Customers talk. Interesting customers you must have discussing the subtleties of financial misrepresentation in tech earnings reports. The way he said it, casual but pointed, made Emma realize he'd heard her earlier comment to the radio. She felt exposed, as if he'd glimpsed a piece of her carefully hidden past. Who were you before this, Emma Collins? Michael asked suddenly. Before diners and soup and small-town hospitality. The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Emma's posture subtly shifted, spine straightening, chin lifting unconsciously, reverting to the boardroom posture she'd once perfected. Someone who learned the hard way that not all successful men have integrity, she replied finally, her voice soft but steel-edged. Now, if you'll excuse me, I should check our supplies. It might be a long night. As she turned away, Michael caught her wrist gently. The touch sent another current between them, this one charged with something deeper than mere physical awareness. I've offended you, see, he said, releasing her immediately when she stiffened. That wasn't my intention. Emma looked down at her wrist, then back to his face. In the dancing shadows, his expression seemed genuinely contrite. No offense taken, she replied evenly. But some stories aren't meant to be shared with strangers during power outages. We are hardly strangers now, Michael countered. You've seen my mother at her most vulnerable. You've witnessed me driving through a blizzard for her, and I've seen... He paused, searching for words. What? Emma challenged. What exactly do you think you've seen, Mr. Reynolds? Someone hiding, he said simply. Someone much too intelligent, incapable to be just, managing a roadside diner. Someone running from something or someone. The accuracy of his assessment sent a chill through Emma that had nothing to do with the storm outside. Catherine Reynolds awoke disoriented, blinking at the unfamiliar ceiling, now illuminated only by candles and emergency lights. The events of the day slowly returned: the taxi, the blinding snow, the kind young woman at the diner. She sat up carefully, her joints protesting. You're awake. Catherine turned to find her son sitting in the booth opposite her, his features softened in the dim lighting. Michael, she breathed, tears springing to her eyes. You came. Of course I came. You left me a voicemail saying you were stranded in a blizzard. His tone was measured, but Catherine could hear the concern beneath it. I wanted to surprise you for your birthday, she said, reaching for his hand across the table, half expecting him to pull away as he always did. To her surprise, he allowed the contact. 43 is an important year. My birthday isn't for 3 days, he said, without the coldness that had characterized their interactions in recent years. I know, I thought we might need time to talk before celebrating. Catherine squeezed his fingers. I've missed you, Michael. Something flickered in his eyes, the same vulnerability she remembered from when he was a boy, quickly shuddered behind practiced control. The roads are closed, he said, instead of addressing her comment. We'll have to stay here tonight. Miss Collins has been very accommodating. Emma, Catherine smiled. She's a remarkable young woman, isn't she? So capable. Michael's expression shifted subtly. There's something unusual about her. She doesn't fit here. Not everyone belongs where life has placed them, Catherine replied softly. You taught me that. Before Michael could respond, Emma appeared with a tray bearing fresh tea and more soup. I thought I heard voices. How are you feeling, Catherine? Much better, dear, and so happy to see my son. You've been very kind to my mother, Michael said, standing. What do I owe you for your trouble? Emma's expression cooled. Nothing. Contrary to what you might believe, Mr. Reynolds, not everything has a price tag. Catherine glanced between them, sensing tension. Emma, please call him Michael. And Michael, stop trying to throw money at every situation. The poor girl offered shelter, not services. Emma suppressed a smile at Catherine's frank assessment. It's fine. Mr. Reynolds and I have already established our differing perspectives. Have we? Michael raised an eyebrow. I thought we were just getting acquainted. Semantics, Emma replied with a dismissive wave. Catherine, there's a small staff room upstairs if you'd like to rest more comfortably. The bathroom is down the hall if you need it. The power's out, but we have emergency lighting and the heat is working. Thank you, dear. Catherine's sharp eyes hadn't missed the charged atmosphere between her son and the diner manager. Perhaps you could show Michael where he'll be sleeping while I freshen up. Emma nodded, though her expression suggested she'd rather show Michael the door. This way, Mr. Reynolds. She led him upstairs to a small room containing a desk, a mini-fridge, and a narrow cot. Staff break room. Not exactly the penthouse at Lakeside Manor, but it's the best I can offer. Michael surveyed the humble space without comment. And where will you sleep? I'll take one of the booths downstairs. I want to stay near the main entrance in case anyone else needs shelter. He frowned. Take the cot. I'll sleep in a booth. I'm not giving the co of Reynolds Innovations a backache on my watch, Emma retorted. The last thing I need is a lawsuit because you couldn't properly code after sleeping on vinyl upholstery. Despite himself, Michael felt his lips twitch. Is that your professional assessment? Just practical risk management. She turned to leave, but he stepped into her path. Why do I get the distinct impression you're trying to avoid being alone with me? He asked, his voice lower than before. Emma met his gaze evenly. Because you're used to women seeking your company, not avoiding it. Touché. He smiled, then a genuine smile that transformed his features from merely handsome to devastating. But that doesn't answer my question. I have a diner to manage during a power outage and blizzard. Entertaining you isn't on my priority list. Entertaining me, Michael echoed, stepping closer. Is that what you think I want, entertainment? Emma refused to back away despite his proximity. The small room suddenly felt even smaller, the air between them charged with something dangerous. I think you're a man used to getting what he wants, she said quietly. And right now you want to solve the puzzle I apparently represent. I'm not interested in being analyzed or acquired, Mr. Reynolds. Michael, he said softly. Michael, she conceded. Now, if you'll excuse me. The building creaked ominously as a particularly strong gust of wind battered the old structure. Emma instinctively reached out to steady herself, her hand landing on Michael's chest. Through the fine material of his shirt, she could feel his heart beating rapidly just like hers. For one breathless moment, they stood frozen, connected by that single point of contact. Emma became acutely aware of his height, the subtle scent of his cologne, the warmth radiating from his body in the chilly room. She pulled away, first clearing her throat. I should check the generator. Downstairs, Emma found Catherine arranging blankets in one of the booths. You don't have to do that, she protested. Nonsense, I'm not an invalid. Catherine smoothed the blanket with practiced hands. Besides, it gives me something to do while you and my son circle each other like wary cats. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. I don't know what you mean. Of course you don't. Catherine's smile was knowing. He's difficult, my Michael. Life made him that way, but there's a good heart underneath all that armor. Mrs. Reynolds. Catherine, please. Catherine, and whatever you think you observed between your son and me, I assure you it's nothing. We're strangers who happen to be trapped by a storm. Fate has interesting methods, Catherine replied cryptically. Now tell me more about yourself, Emma. What brought you to this charming little diner? Emma busied herself adjusting candles. It's not an exciting story. I disagree, came Michael's voice as he descended the stairs. I think it's probably very exciting. Emma shot him a warning glance. Your mother needs rest, not my life history. Actually, Catherine interjected, what I need is food. I'm starving. Grateful for the diversion, Emma headed to the kitchen. I can make sandwiches. The gas stove still works if you'd prefer something hot. Allow me to help, Michael offered, following her before she could object. In the kitchen, Emma pulled ingredients from the refrigerator. Make yourself useful and slice the bread. To her surprise, Michael rolled up his sleeves and did as instructed. He handled the knife with unexpected skill, cutting even slices from the artisan loaf. You've done that before, she observed. I worked in a deli through college, he replied. At her startled look, he added, did you think I was born a CEO? Honestly, yes. Michael laughed, a rich sound that transformed his face again. My father was a plumber. My mother was a nurse. I grew up in a two-bedroom house in Rochester and worked every summer from age 16. Emma handed him tomatoes to slice. So how did you become... She gestured vaguely at his expensive watch and tailored shirt. The heartless corporate titan, he supplied dryly. Your words, not mine. I created an algorithm that revolutionized supply chain management while still in grad school. Built a company around it. Made some good decisions, some brutal ones. He deftly arranged the tomato slices on the bread. The rest is business history. And somewhere along the way you stopped speaking to your mother, Emma added softly. Michael's hands stilled. That's a complicated situation. Family usually is. Emma turned to the stove, stirring a pot of soup she'd set to warm. You're not close with yours? He asked, moving beside her to help. Emma kept her eyes on the pot. My parents died when I was in college. Car accident. I'm sorry. The simple words held genuine sympathy. It was a long time ago, she said, reaching past him for bowls, her arm brushing his. Again, that unsettling awareness flared between them. And after college, Michael pressed gently, where did Emma Collins go before she arrived at this diner? Emma ladled soup into bowls with precise movements. New York. Finance. It didn't work out. Wall Street. Michael's interest sharpened. Which firm? Does it matter? It matters because you are running from something, Michael said quietly. And whatever it is forced someone with obvious intelligence and education to hide in a small-town diner. Emma turned to face him, her composure slipping for the first time. Not everyone who steps away from corporate America is running or hiding. Some of us simply discovered that success by those standards comes at too high a price. The raw honesty in her voice silenced him. For a moment, they stood facing each other in the dim kitchen, the storm raging outside while something equally turbulent built between them. Who hurt you, Emma? Michael asked finally, his voice barely audible above the wind. Her laugh was soft, bitter. The better question is, who didn't? Before he could respond, the back door of the diner burst open, sending a blast of cold air through the kitchen. Emma whirled around, startled. A demand staggered in from the storm snow, coating his expensive overcoat. Thank God, the newcomer exclaimed, stamping his feet. I thought I'd freeze to death out there. Michael stiffened beside her. Victor, he said flatly, what are you doing here? The man looked up, recognition and relief washing over his face. Michael, I've been trying to reach you for hours. He stopped abruptly as his gaze fell on Emma. For one suspended moment, recognition flashed in his eyes, followed immediately by something darker, fear. Emma Collins, he said, his voice suddenly strained. Well, this is unexpected. Emma had gone perfectly still, their face drained of color. Victor Sterling, she whispered, of all the diners in all the storms. Michael looked between them, his analytical mind racing to connect the pieces. You two know each other. It wasn't a question, but Victor answered anyway, his charming smile returning too quickly. Ancient history. Ms. Collins once worked at my investment firm. He extended his hand. Small world, isn't it? Emma stared at the offered hand like it was a venomous snake. Very small, she agreed, not moving to take it and getting smaller by the minute. The kitchen seemed to shrink around them, the air suddenly thick with tension. Michael looked between Emma and Victor, noting the rigid set of Emma's shoulders and the forced casualness in Victor's smile. Ms. Collins was one of our brightest analysts, Victor continued smoothly when the silence stretched too long. Left quite suddenly, as I recall. I had my reasons, Emma replied, her voice steady despite the pallor of her face. Compelling ones. Victor removed his snow-dusted coat, hanging it as if he owned the place. Water under the bridge, surely. He turned to Michael. When Catherine called looking for you, I was concerned. The roads are treacherous. You drove all this way because my mother called the office. Michael's skepticism was evident. I was already in Burlington for the Summit Tech Acquisition meeting when I couldn't reach you. Victor shrugged. You know how I worry about my best friend and business partner. Emma wordlessly gathered the food she'd prepared onto a tray. I should take this to Catherine. As she tried to pass, Victor shifted, blocking her path. Let me help you with that, Emma. We have so much to catch up on. I've got it, she said flatly, sidestepping him. Michael observed the interaction with growing suspicion. Something was very wrong here. The woman who had confidently stood up to him moments ago now seemed almost afraid. Victor, a word, he gestured toward the walk-in pantry away from the kitchen's main area. Once inside, Michael didn't mince words. What history do you have with her? Victor raised his eyebrows. Straight to the point as always. She worked at Sterling Capital for about 18 months. Promising career until she had some kind of breakdown. Ethical crisis, she called it. He shook his head. Shame. She had potential. And that's all. What else would there be? Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. Don't tell me the great Michael Reynolds is interested in a diner manager. She's hiding something, Michael said, ignoring the jab. And based on her reaction to you, it involves Sterling Capital. Victor leaned against a shelf. Michael, you know how these young idealists are. They come to Wall Street thinking they'll change the world, then can't handle the reality of business. Emma couldn't separate her personal feelings from professional decisions. It made her unstable. She seems anything but unstable to me. You've known her for what, a few hours? Victor laughed softly. I employed her for over a year. Trust me, there's a reason she's serving coffee in Vermont instead of managing portfolios in Manhattan. Michael studied his friend and business partner carefully. Victor had been his right-hand man since Reynolds Innovations began, instrumental in their meteoric rise. They'd weathered countless storms together, professional and personal. Yet something about Victor's too casual dismissal of Emma bothered him. She took care of my mother, Michael said finally. I owe her for that. Of course you do. Just don't mistake gratitude for something more. Victor clapped him on the shoulder. Now shall we join the ladies? I'm starving. When they returned to the main dining area, they found Emma and Catherine seated in a booth talking quietly. Emma's posture remained tense, but she'd regained her color. She looked up as the men approached, her eyes skipping over Victor to focus on Michael. Catherine's been telling me about your childhood science experiments, she said, a forced lightness in her tone. Apparently you were building robots while other kids were riding bikes. Mother exaggerates, Michael replied, sliding into the seat beside Emma, while Victor took the spot next to Catherine. I do not, Catherine protested. You rewired the entire basement when you were 12. Nearly burned the house down. That was one time, Michael said, the corner of his mouth lifting. Victor reached for a sandwich. Michael was always ahead of the curve. It's what makes him such a brilliant CEO, willing to take calculated risks that others avoid. Even when those risks affect people's lives. Emma asked her questions seemingly innocent, but with an undercurrent that made Michael look at her sharply. Business always affects lives, Victor replied smoothly. The trick is focusing on the greater good rather than individual sentimentality. And who decides what that greater good is? Emma pressed. Those with the vision and authority to make such decisions, Victor answered. Wouldn't you agree, Michael? All eyes turned to him. Michael considered his response carefully, aware of the sudden weight his words carried in this strange tableau. I believe in ethical business practices, he said finally. Profit without principle is ultimately unsustainable. Emma's expression remained neutral, but he caught a flicker of surprise in her eyes. Noble sentiments, Victor remarked, though sometimes difficult to apply in practice, as Emma discovered. He turned to her. How long have you been in Burlington? It must be, 3 years now? 4, she corrected, her jaw tight. 4 years, Victor echoed thoughtfully. Amazing how time flies. You know, Michael, Emma was involved in an interesting situation before she left Sterling Capital. Perhaps she's told you about it. The subtle threat in his tone was unmistakable. Emma set down her spoon, her knuckles white. Victor, she said quietly, don't. Catherine, sensing the rising tension, intervened. I'm feeling rather tired. Perhaps we could continue this conversation tomorrow. Of course, Emma agreed, quickly standing. Let me refresh your blankets. As Emma helped Catherine back to the office, Victor leaned toward Michael. She hasn't told you, has she? Told me what? Why she really left New York? Victor shook his head. I'm not surprised. It's not something she'd be proud of. Stop dancing around it, Michael demanded. What happened? Victor studied him for a moment. She accused Sterling Capital of fraud, claimed we were manipulating market data, misleading clients. Tried to take her evidence to the SEC. Michael frowned. And were you? Victor looked genuinely offended. Of course not. We were cleared of all allegations, but by then the damage to Emma's reputation was done. No firm on Wall Street would touch her after that kind of betrayal, so she ran to Vermont. Can you blame her? She tried to destroy the company that gave her every opportunity. Victor's expression softened to concern. Look, I'm not telling you this to speak ill of her. I'm telling you because we're on the verge of the biggest acquisition of our careers. The Summit Tech deal will triple Reynolds Innovations' market value if nothing derails it. What does Emma have to do with Summit Tech? Probably nothing, Victor conceded. But timing is everything. We can't afford any complications. Before Michael could respond, Emma returned. The sight of her head held high despite the obvious strain around her eyes made something twist in his chest. Catherine is settled, she announced. I've made up a couple more beds in case the storm brings other strays. Victor stood, straightening his suit. I should check in with the office. Is there anywhere I might make a private call? The storage room has the strongest signal, Emma replied tonelessly. After Victor departed, an uncomfortable silence fell between them. Michael watched Emma methodically clearing dishes, her movements precise but mechanical. Were you planning to tell me, he asked finally. She didn't pretend to misunderstand. About Victor. It didn't seem relevant until he walked through that door. About your allegations against his company. Emma's hands stilled. She turned to face him, her expression carefully composed. So he shared his version of events. He says you accused Sterling Capital of fraud, that the allegations were investigated and dismissed. Is that all he said? She asked, a bitter smile touching her lips. Should there be more? Emma studied him for a long moment. Would it matter if there were? Victor Sterling is my friend and business partner. I'm just the woman who happened to shelter your mother during a storm. The distance in her voice bothered him more than it should have. I prefer to form my own judgments. Based on what you barely know me, Michael. I'm a good judge of character. So was I once. She turned back to the dishes. Look how that worked out for me. Michael stepped on closer, invading her base until she was forced to face him again. Tell me your side. Why, so you can decide which of us is lying. She shook her head. I don't need to justify myself to you. Damn it, Emma. He caught himself lowering his voice. I'm trying to understand. No, you're trying to protect your business interests. Her eyes flashed with sudden anger. Victor made sure to mention your big acquisition, didn't he? Warned you that I might be a complication. Michael's silence confirmed her suspicion. That's what I thought. She moved to step around him, but he caught her arm. What did you find at Sterling Capital? He asked quietly. For a moment it seemed she might tell him. Then the back door opened again as Victor returned, his timing impeccable as always. Sorry to interrupt, he said, though his smile suggested he was anything but sorry. Michael, I need to speak with you about the Summit situation. Something's come up. Emma pulled her arm from Michael's grasp. I should check the generator anyway. As she disappeared into the back, Victor handed Michael his phone. You should see this email that just came through. Michael scanned the message, his expression hardening. This data can't be right. That's what I thought, but I've triple-checked the figures. Victor took the phone back. Summit Tech's valuation was inflated. If we'd gone through with the acquisition at the agreed price, we'd have overpaid by millions. At best, Michael finished grimly. At worst, we could have been accused of knowingly engaging in securities fraud. We dodged a bullet, Michael. How did you find this? One of our analysts caught it. Pure luck. Victor ran a hand through his hair. But it makes me wonder how many other deals might have similar issues lurking in their financial reports. Michael frowned, his mind racing through implications. We need to overhaul our due diligence process. Exactly my concern, Victor hesitated. There's something else. The analyst who caught it found Emma Collins' name on some of the original Summit Tech prospectus documents from her time at Sterling Capital. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, just noting a curious coincidence. Victor's expression was neutral. She had access to the early Summit Tech financials. Then she makes fraud allegations against Sterling. Now she's mysteriously back in your orbit just as we're about to acquire Summit. That's quite a conspiracy theory. Is it the woman who tried to destroy my company just happens to be here with your mother the night before our biggest deal? Victor shook his head. I don't believe in coincidences that convenient. Michael wanted to dismiss Victor's suspicions, but years of business instinct kept him from doing so outright. Emma Collins was hiding something. That much was clear, and the timing was indeed suspicious. I'll talk to her, he decided. Get to the bottom of it. Just be careful, Victor warned. She's convincing. Trust me, I learned that the hard way. When Emma returned, she found the two men huddled in conversation. They broke apart at her approach, and the sudden silence spoke volumes. The way Michael looked at her, more guarded than before, analytical rather than curious, told her everything she needed to know. The generator should last through the night, she reported, her voice professional and distant. If you gentlemen will excuse me, I have some inventory to complete before morning. Emma, Michael called after her, we need to talk. She paused, not turning around. I think your business partner has said everything that needs saying, Mr. Reynolds. The formality stung. You haven't told your side. Would it make a difference? She glanced back, her smile sad. Some battles aren't worth fighting twice. Later that night, as the storm howled outside, Michael found himself unable to sleep on the narrow cot. The Summit Tech situation demanded his attention, but his thoughts kept circling back to Emma Collins, the hurt in her eyes when she'd realized he was doubting her, the resignation in her voice. A soft knock interrupted his ruminations. He opened the door to find Catherine standing there, wrapped in a blanket. Mother, you should be resting. I've had quite enough rest. She moved past him into the small room. We need to talk about Emma. There's nothing to discuss. Don't lie to me, Michael. I raised you. Catherine settled onto the edge of the cot. Victor Sterling has poisoned your mind against her, hasn't he? Michael sighed. It's complicated. There's history between them, professional conflicts that could impact our business. And that's all that matters to you, business. Catherine's disappointment was palpable. That girl saved my life today, and you're letting that snake turn you against her without even hearing her story. I tried to hear her story. She wouldn't tell me. Would you in her position after the way you looked at her just now? Catherine shook her head. I may be old, Michael, but I know a good soul when I meet one, and I know when my son is making a terrible mistake. What would you have me do? Dismiss legitimate business concerns because she was kind to you? I would have you remember that not everyone is motivated by profit and power. Catherine rose with dignity. Your father would be disappointed to see what you've become. The words hit Michael like a physical blow. Before he could respond, a commotion downstairs drew their attention. Stay here, he instructed, heading for the stairs. In the main dining area, he found Emma confronting Victor, their voices low but intense. You have no right, she was saying, fury evident in every line of her body. No right to come here and threaten me again. Threaten I'm simply having a friendly conversation about old times. Victor's smug smile vanished when he noticed Michael. There you are. Michael and I were just reminiscing. It didn't sound like reminiscing, Michael observed coldly. Mr. Sterling was just leaving, Emma announced, arms crossed defensively across her chest. Apparently the storm has cleared enough for travel. Victor shrugged. The plows came through. Roads to the north are passable now. He collected his coat. Michael, we should leave too. The Summit situation requires our immediate attention. Summit? Emma repeated the word like ice on her tongue. Of course it all makes sense now. Something in her expression made Michael pause. What do you know about Summit Tech? Before she could answer, Victor interrupted. Michael, this is hardly the time or place. We have a crisis to manage. It was Summit, wasn't it? Emma's gaze never left Michael's face. That was what I found. The fraud at Sterling Capital. It involves Summit Tech. Victor's face hardened, his charm evaporating like snow on a hot engine. You're delusional, he snapped. Michael, we need to leave now. But Michael didn't move, his eyes locked on Emma's. Explain. Emma straightened, years of suppressed fury and vindication coursing through her veins. 3 years ago, I discovered irregularities in Summit Tech financial reports while working at Sterling Capital. Multiple reports systematically altered to inflate their value. When I brought my concerns to management, her gaze flicked to Victor. I was told to adjust my findings. She's lying, Victor interjected. Summit Tech financials were thoroughly vetted. By whom? Emma challenged. The same team you instructed to falsify data, the same analysts who mysteriously all received promotions after I was discredited. Michael held up his hands, silencing Victor's retort. Continue, he told Emma. She drew a steadying breath. When I refused to participate, I was removed from the Summit account. A week later, I found evidence that the manipulation went beyond Summit. It was systematic. Sterling Capital was artificially inflating the value of multiple companies before acquisition deals. Preposterous, Victor scoffed. If there had been any truth to these allegations, the SEC would have. The SEC investigation was a sham, Emma cut in, because by the time I gathered enough evidence to approach them, someone had already altered the original data. My access credentials had been used to make changes I never authorized. It made it appear I was the one committing fraud. A heavy silence followed her words. Victor's face had gone still, too still, and Michael's analytical mind registered the unnatural composure. Not outrage, not shock calculation. You were set up, Michael said quietly. Yes. Emma's eyes never left his. By the time I realized what had happened, I'd been fired for ethical violations, blacklisted from every financial institution in New York. My former colleagues were warned not to associate with me. My reputation was destroyed. So you ran, Michael concluded. I didn't run, Emma corrected, chin lifting. I was pushed out, threatened with litigation if I pursued my claims. With no job, mounting legal bills, and suddenly toxic to every firm in Manhattan, I had to start over. Convenient story, Victor interrupted, his voice smooth again, but ultimately unprovable. You destroyed the evidence, Emma retorted, but you didn't get all of it. Victor went very still. What do you mean? Emma's smile was cold. Insurance policy. Before my access was revoked, I made copies. You're bluffing, Victor said, but his face had paled slightly. Am I? She turned to Michael. The Summit acquisition you're pursuing what made you suddenly question their valuation tonight? Michael's expression revealed nothing. Data inconsistencies, specifically, revenue projection, anomalies, discrepancies between reported earnings and actual cash flow. Emma nodded. The same issues I flagged 3 years ago, I'm guessing. Only the numbers are probably worse now because they've had years to compound the fraud. Catherine had appeared at the base of the stairs, watching the confrontation with concern. Michael, she called. He didn't turn. It's all right, Mother. Go back to bed. No, Catherine said firmly, approaching. I don't think it is all right, not if what I'm hearing is true. Victor recovered his composure, assuming his most reassuring smile. Mrs. Reynolds, I assure you this is just a misunderstanding. Son Collins has a personal vendetta. Young man, Catherine interrupted, I was married to a plumber for 40 years. I know what integrity looks like, and right now I don't see it in you. Victor's smile froze. With all due respect, enough. Michael's voice cut through the tension. Victor, did you know about the Summit fraud? There was no fraud, Victor insisted. Just aggressive accounting practices common in. Did you know? Each word fell like a hammer. For the first time, Victor looked uncertain. You're not seriously taking her side. After everything we've built together, she's nobody. Michael, a failed analyst who couldn't handle the pressure of real business. Answer the question. Victor's expression hardened. Fine. Yes, I knew Summit was cooking their books. Everyone knew. It's how the game is played. We would have fixed it after acquisition restructured their reporting, and no one would have been the wiser. Except the shareholders who would have paid an inflated price, Emma pointed out. The employees who would have lost jobs in the restructuring, the pension funds invested in both companies. Collateral damage, Victor dismissed. The kind of casualties Michael has never hesitated to accept in pursuit of growth. Isn't that right, partner? Michael's expression remained impassive, but Emma saw something shift in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or recognition. You said you have evidence, Michael asked Emma, ignoring Victor's attempt to implicate him. I do. Not here, obviously. It's in a safe place. Alleged evidence, Victor corrected, which conveniently can't be produced right now. I don't need to produce it right now, Emma replied evenly. Just explain what it contains. The original Summit reports emails directing analysts to alter data. The access log showing my credentials being used while I was demonstrably elsewhere. She turned to Michael. Do you want to know how deep it goes? How many other acquisitions were based on fraudulent data? She's lying, Victor insisted, a hint of desperation entering his voice. Michael, we've been friends for 15 years, partners. I've stood by you through everything. Are you really going to throw that away based on the word of this This waitress, manager, Emma corrected automatically. Michael remained silent, weighing, evaluating. Emma could almost see the calculations happening behind his eyes. Loyalty versus truth, friendship versus integrity, the empire he'd built versus the foundation it stood on. Think about what you're doing, Victor warned. If she takes this public, it won't just be me who falls. Reynolds Innovations has been involved in every major deal Sterling Capital has structured for the past decade. Your reputation, your company. Stop. Michael's voice was quiet but final. You're making my decision easier with every word, Victor. Catherine moved to stand beside Emma, placing a supportive hand on her arm. The simple gesture of solidarity brought unexpected tears to Emma's eyes. Victor looked between them in disbelief. You can't be serious, Michael. Everything we've built was built on fraud, apparently. Michael's face had hardened to granite. Get out. You'll regret this, Victor hissed. When your stock plummets and the lawsuits start. I said get out. Michael stepped forward, his heightened presence suddenly intimidating. Now, before I call the authorities and have this conversation in front of witnesses with badges. For one tense moment, it seemed Victor might refuse. Then with deliberate calm, he straightened his coat. This isn't over, he said quietly, not by a long shot. After Victor stormed out, the diner fell into heavy silence. Emma realized she was trembling, adrenaline and relief and lingering fear coursing through her veins. I should check if he's actually left, she murmured, needing a moment alone to compose herself. Let him go, Michael replied, still watching the door. We have bigger concerns now. Catherine squeezed Emma's arm gently. I'll make us some tea. This seems like a conversation that needs tea. When Catherine had bustled off to the kitchen, Michael finally turned to face Emma. His expression was unreadable. You've had this evidence for 3 years, he said. Why didn't you use it? Emma sank into a booth, suddenly exhausted. I tried. No one would listen. Victor had thoroughly discredited me, and Sterling Capital had resources I couldn't match. Then there were the threats. What threats? At first, just professional ones, then more personal. She looked down at her hands. One night, someone broke into my apartment. Nothing was taken, but my files were clearly searched. The next day, I received a photo of my parents' graves with a message, some things should stay buried. Michael's jaw tightened. Victor, I never found proof, but the timing was persuasive. She looked up, meeting his eyes. So I left, started over, tried to build a quiet life where no one from that world would find me. Until tonight, Michael said softly. Until tonight, she agreed. He slid into the booth across from her. I need to see this evidence. Why, so Reynolds Innovations can contain the damage. The bitterness in her voice was unmistakable. So I can do the right thing, Michael corrected quietly. Emma studied his face, looking for deception. And what is the right thing in your estimation? I don't know yet. His honesty was disarming. But burying the truth isn't it. Catherine returned with 3 mugs of tea, sliding one to each of them before joining Michael on his side of the booth. So, she said briskly, my son's business partner is a criminal, and the lovely young woman who saved me from freezing to death is his whistleblower. What are we going to do about it? The unexpected framing of their situation, so practical, so matter-of-fact, startled a laugh from Emma. The sound surprised her. She couldn't remember the last time she genuinely laughed. Mother, Michael sighed, though the corner of his mouth twitched. What am I wrong, File? No one who's met you would ever make that mistake, Emma said, smiling despite herself. Then stop dancing around each other and make a plan. Catherine set down her mug with finality. Emma has evidence. Michael has influence. Between you, you can fix this mess. It's not that simple, Michael began. It never is, Catherine agreed. But doing the right thing rarely is. Emma watched as Michael's expression softened, looking at his mother. For all their estrangement, the bond between them was evident, a shared moral clarity that cut through complications. The evidence is in a safe deposit box, Emma said after a moment. In Boston. Michael nodded. Once the storm clears, we'll go there together. And then, she pressed, and then we bring the truth to light properly, this time with resources Victor can't intimidate or outmaneuver. Your company will survive, Emma asked skeptically. Reynolds Innovations is more than its partnerships, Michael finished firmly. The foundations are solid, even if some of the structures built on them aren't. Catherine beamed at her son, pride evident in every line of her face. That's my boy. For the first time in years, Emma allowed herself to feel hope. Fragile but real. It won't be easy, she warned. Victor has powerful friends, deep pockets. So do I, Michael reminded her, a spark of the ruthless businessman returning, but now directed toward a worthy target. And unlike Victor, I don't have to hide from the truth. Catherine yawned, breaking the intensity of the moment. Well, this has been quite an evening. I think I'll try to get some more sleep before dawn. She touched Emma's hand gently. Don't worry, dear. My son can be stubborn and sometimes arrogant, but when it matters, he makes the right choices. After Catherine had gone, Emma and Michael sat in companionable silence, the storm outside beginning to ease much like the turbulence between them. I'm sorry I doubted you, Michael said finally. You had reason to, Emma acknowledged. Loyalty to friends is admirable even when misplaced. Not at the expense of truth. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers, or justice. The warmth of his touch, the sincerity in his eyes made something shift inside Emma, a wall beginning to crumble, a door long closed starting to open. Why are you helping me? She asked softly. You could have left with Victor, protected your company, your reputation. Perhaps I'm tired of being the ruthless CEO everyone expects. His thumb traced gentle circles on her wrist. Or perhaps I found something more important than quarterly projections in market share in a small-town diner during a blizzard. She smiled skeptically. Stranger things have happened. His answering smile transformed his face, warming his eyes. My mother would say it was fate. And what would Michael Reynolds say? He considered her question seriously. That sometimes we need to get lost to find what we're really looking for. Outside, the first pale light of dawn began to illuminate the snow-covered landscape. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed, pristine, unblemished, full of new possibilities. Much like the feelings taking root between them, the morning sun cast long shadows across the snow-blanketed landscape as Michael Reynolds guided his Audi R8 along the freshly plowed highway toward Boston. Emma sat beside him in the passenger seat, her eyes scanning the rearview mirror every few minutes while Catherine dozed in the back, wrapped in a cashmere travel blanket. 3 hours had passed since Victor Sterling had stormed out of Maple Creek Diner, and Michael harbored no illusions about what his former partner was doing now. Victor would be mobilizing resources, calling in favors, doing everything in his power to contain the threat Emma Bayham and her evidence posed. The thought that Victor might succeed kept Michael's foot heavy on the accelerator. There's a black SUV that's been behind us since Burlington, Emma said quietly, her eyes still on the mirror. 3 cars back, tinted windows. Michael glanced in the rear view. I noticed. Could be nothing. Or it could be Victor's people. We'll find out soon enough. Michael changed lanes abruptly, taking an exit that wasn't part of their route. The SUV followed. Not nothing. Emma confirmed, her voice steady despite the implication. Michael's jaw tightened as he accelerated, taking another sudden turn onto a service road. Mother, he called over his shoulder, you might want to wake up and hold on. Catherine stirred. What's happening? We have company, Michael replied, his focus on the road as he executed a series of rapid turns designed to lose their tail. Victor's people, Catherine asked, surprisingly calm for a woman in her 70s being driven at high speed by her son. Looks that way. Emma answered, bracing herself against the dashboard as Michael swerved sharply onto a narrow side street. Where did you learn to drive like this? Emma asked as Michael maneuvered the sports car with precision that spoke of more than just good reflexes. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. My father may have been a plumber, but he loved cars. Spent every extra dollar on track days. Taught me everything he knew. Your father sounds like an interesting man, Emma said. He was. For a moment, sorrow shadowed Michael's features. The world lost something important when he died. Catherine reached forward from the pie seat, her hand touching Michael's shoulder in silent understanding. Look, Emma pointed to the rear view. The SUV was gone, lost somewhere in the maze of suburban streets. I think we lost them. For now, Michael replied, steering them back toward the highway. But they'll be waiting at the bank, I'm sure of it. Then we need a plan, Emma said, pulling out her phone. I know someone who might be able to help. 2 hours later, they arrived at the outskirts of Boston. Emma had made several calls, speaking in hushed tones that Michael couldn't quite make out. All he gathered was that she still had allies from her Wall Street days, people who believed her story and were willing to help. Turn here. Emma directed, pointing to an underground parking structure that wasn't part of their original route. My friend James works security at First Commonwealth Bank. He's going to help us avoid any unwelcome company when we access the safe deposit box. Inside the parking garage, a tall, athletic man in a suit waited beside a service elevator. He nodded in recognition when he saw Emma. James? Emma greeted him with obvious relief. Thank you for this. Anything for the woman who saved my retirement fund, he replied cryptically, shaking her hand before turning to Michael and Catherine. Mr. Reynolds, Mrs. Reynolds, James Cortez, head of security for First Commonwealth. Emma warned me you might have people following you. Former business partner, Michael confirmed, not taking our parting of ways well. James nodded knowingly. Financial world's a shark tank. This way, please. He led them through a service corridor that connected the parking structure to the bank's back offices, bypassing the main entrance entirely. My office first, James said, ushering them into a small, functional room dominated by security monitors. Let me check the main floor. He typed commands into his keyboard, and the monitors displayed various angles of the bank's lobby and exterior. There, Emma pointed to a screen showing 3 men in dark suits lingering near the safe deposit box area. Victor didn't waste any time. Friends of yours? James asked dryly. Former colleagues, Emma replied. Not the friendly kind. James studied the monitor. I count 5 of them total, 2 outside, 3 inside, professional types. Private security, Michael surmised. Victor employs ex-military contractors for sensitive matters. James raised an eyebrow. Sounds like your former partner plays rough. You have no idea, Emma murmured. So how do we get to the safe deposit box without them knowing? Catherine asked, practical as ever. James smiled. That's where I come in. Emma's box isn't in the main vault. It's in our executive client section, separate entrance, separate security. I can get you there without them seeing. Will that work? Michael asked Emma. What about identification requirements? I set this up carefully, Emma explained. The box is registered to Emma Robinson, my mother's maiden name. I have the ID to match. She pulled out a driver's license that bore her photo but a different name. Michael looked impressed despite himself. You really did think of everything. When your life is destroyed once you learn to prepare for the world, she replied simply. James led them through another series of corridors, eventually arriving at a discreet suite marked Executive Client Services. Blom, inside a single bank officer, greeted them with professional courtesy, accepting Emma's alternative identification without question after a confirming nod from James. Minutes later, they were alone in a private viewing room, the safe deposit box open before them. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she lifted the lid. This is everything, she said, removing a waterproof document case. Every piece of evidence I could salvage before they lock me out of the system. Michael helped her spread the contents across the table. There were financial statements, internal emails, access logs, and, most damning of all, the original Summit Tech reports showing the unaltered figures alongside the manipulated ones. My God, Michael breathed as he examined the documents. This is systematic fraud on a massive scale. 7 companies, Emma confirmed, all acquired by various firms after Sterling Capital inflated their value. 3 of them by Reynolds Innovations. Michael felt sick as he recognized the names of companies his firm had purchased at Victor's recommendation over the past 5 years. I knew these deals seemed too good to be true, he muttered more to himself than to the others. But I trusted Victor. He was very convincing, Emma said without judgment. That's how he rose so high so fast. Catherine, who had been silently examining some of the emails, looked up. There's something else here. These acquisition targets, they weren't random, were they? Emma shook her head. They all had one thing in common. Each company held patents or technologies that created a strategic stranglehold on their respective markets when combined under one owner. Market manipulation, Michael realized. Not just fraud in the acquisitions, but creating artificial monopolies afterward. Which is why the SEC should have investigated more thoroughly, Emma said bitterly. But Victor has friends in high places. Not anymore. Michael promised, gathering the documents carefully. Not after we're done. As James escorted them back to their car through the service corridors, Michael's phone vibrated with a text message. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. What is it? Emma asked. Victor, Michael replied grimly. He's called an emergency board meeting at Reynolds Innovations. 3 hours from now. He's making his move, Emma said. Trying to get ahead of us poison the well. Then we better not keep them waiting, Michael said, his voice hardening with resolve. James, thank you for your help. We need to get back to New York immediately. Be careful, James warned, his eyes on Emma. Men like Sterling don't take threats lightly. Neither do I, Michael assured him, placing a protective hand on Emma's back as they walked to the car. The drive to New York was tense, the evidence secured in a briefcase on Emma's lap. Michael made numerous calls, mobilizing his legal team and closest allies on the board of directors. Catherine mostly listened occasionally, offering insights from her decades of observing the corporate world as the wife and mother of businessmen. Victor will try to frame this as a personal vendetta, she predicted. He'll say Emma is manipulating you, that she doctored the evidence. Let him try, Michael replied, his voice cold with determination. The documents speak for themselves. It's not just the documents they need to believe in, Emma cautioned. It's you. These people have worked with Victor for years. They trust him. And they've worked with me even longer, Michael reminded her. When it comes down to it, Reynolds Innovations is my company, not Victor's. I've actually suspected something wasn't right with some of our acquisitions for a while, Michael confessed, surprising both women. About 8 months ago, I quietly asked our finance team to review previous deals, but Victor always managed to divert resources or delay the investigations with seemingly legitimate reasons. I should have pushed harder. You suspected, Emma looked at him with new respect. I noticed patterns in the financials that didn't quite add up, he explained. But I let myself be convinced they were normal market fluctuations. Sometimes we see what we want to see. As they neared Manhattan, Michael made one final call to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. It was time to take this beyond corporate politics. What Victor had done wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. The Reynolds Innovations headquarters dominated a prime corner of Manhattan's financial district, 60 stories of gleaming glass and steel reaching toward the sky. As their car pulled into the executive parking garage, Emma felt a flutter of anxiety. It had been years since she'd set foot in a corporate boardroom, and the last time hadn't ended well for her. You don't have to come up, Michael told her, sensing her apprehension. You could wait here with Mother. Emma straightened her shoulders. I've been running from Victor Sterling for 4 years. I'm not hiding now. Catherine smiled approvingly. Courage suits you, dear. The executive elevator whisked them to the top floor, where Michael's assistant waited, her professional composure slipping just enough to show her concern. They're all here, she informed Michael. Mr. Sterling arrived 30 minutes ago. He's been meeting privately with board members. Thank you, Jennifer, Michael replied calmly. Please have security on standby. Jennifer's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded without question. The boardroom fell silent when Michael entered, Emma and Catherine at his side. Victor sat at the far end of the table in what was normally Michael's chair, flanked by 2 men Emma recognized as Sterling Capital attorneys. The 12 members of the Reynolds Innovations Board occupied the remaining seats, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright hostility. Michael, Victor began smoothly. I'm glad you could join us. We were just discussing some concerning developments. I'm sure you were, Michael replied, his voice steady as he placed his briefcase on the table. But before we continue, you're in my seat, Victor. A tense moment passed before Victor smiled tightly and moved to an adjacent chair. It was a small victory, but a significant one. The power dynamic in the room shifted perceptibly. Board members, Michael addressed the group, I apologize for the unusual circumstances of this meeting. As you've no doubt been told, there's a situation involving Sterling Capital that affects Reynolds Innovations. Michael interrupted Barbara Chen, the longest-serving board member. Victor has made some disturbing allegations about Ms. Collins here. He says she's a disgruntled former employee with a vendetta against Sterling Capital and by extension against our company. That's one version of events, Michael acknowledged. Now I'd like to present another with evidence. For the next hour, Michael and Emma laid out the case, methodically presenting the documents from the safe deposit box alongside Reynolds Innovations' own records. The board listened in growing disbelief as the scope of the fraud became clear. These acquisition targets were systematically overvalued, Michael explained. Reynolds Innovations overpaid by millions based on financial data that Sterling Capital knew was falsified. This is absurd. Victor interjected, his composure beginning to crack. These documents could easily have been fabricated. So Collins had ample time and motive to create this elaborate fiction. The access logs don't lie, Victor, Emma countered, highlighting the timestamps that showed her credentials being used when airline records proved she was on a flight to Chicago. Someone used my login to alter data after hours, then framed me for the very fraud they committed. And we're supposed to believe that I what orchestrated this elaborate conspiracy, Victor scoffed. For what purpose? To protect the network of fraudulent acquisitions you'd been facilitating for years, Michael said coldly. The same pattern appears in multiple deals, not just ours. The board members exchanged troubled glances. Barbara Chen studied the Summit Tech documents with particular intensity. These irregularities, she said slowly, they match concerns I raised during the preliminary evaluation. Concerns that were dismissed as overly cautious. By whom, Michael asked, though he already knew the answer. Barbara's eyes flicked to Victor. By Mr. Sterling. He assured us his team had vetted the numbers thoroughly. Victor's attorneys whispered urgently in his ear, but he waved them off, his face flushing with anger. This is a witch hunt, he declared. Michael is upset because I questioned his judgment regarding Ms. Collins. This is personal, not professional. It became professional the moment you used my company to legitimize fraud, Michael replied evenly. And it became criminal when you destroyed evidence and threatened a whistleblower. At the word criminal, Victor's face drained of color. You're overreacting. These are standard, aggressive accounting practices. Is that what we're calling securities fraud now? Emma asked. Aggressive accounting. Catherine, who had been silently observing from a chair against the wall, suddenly spoke. Young man, my late husband had a saying about people like you. A man who lies about small things will lie about big ones too. The board members here might be considering the financial implications of this revelation, but I hope they're also considering the moral ones. Her quiet dignity silenced the room. Even Victor had no ready retort. Michael seized the moment. I've already contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They'll want statements from everyone involved. In the meantime, I move that we immediately suspend all business dealings with Sterling Capital and conduct a full audit of every acquisition in which they served as advisors. You can't do that, Victor protested. Our companies are too intertwined. You'll destroy both of us. No, Victor, Michael corrected him. You did that when you chose fraud over integrity. The board voted unanimously to support Michael's motion. As security escorted a stunned Victor and his attorneys from the building, Michael felt a strange mixture of vindication and grief. 15 years of friendship and partnership ended in a single day. But it had been built on lies, he reminded himself. Better to face the painful truth than live comfortably with deception. The following weeks passed in a blur of SEC interviews, legal depositions, and emergency board sessions. Reynolds Innovation stock took an initial hit when the news broke, but Michael's transparency and decisive action stemmed the bleeding. The company would survive, changed but intact. Emma stayed in New York working closely with federal investigators to unravel the full scope of Victor's fraud. She moved into Catherine's spacious Upper East Side apartment, the older woman having refused to return to her solitary life in Connecticut. I've spent 5 years rattling around that big house by myself, Catherine explained when Emma protested that it was too much. It's nice having someone to talk to besides the housekeeper. The case against Victor Sterling gathered momentum as other victims of his schemes came forward. 3 months into the investigation, the day finally arrived for Victor's preliminary hearing. Michael, Emma, and Catherine attended together, united in their determination to see justice done. As they sat in the courtroom waiting for proceedings to begin, Victor entered with his legal team. When he spotted Emma, his face contorted with rage. Before anyone could react, he lunged toward her. You ruined everything, he snarled, reaching for her throat. Michael moved with surprising speed, intercepting Victor and pushing him back forcefully. Security rushed forward, restraining the enraged financier as he continued to hurl threats. I should have buried you when I had the chance, Victor shouted as he was dragged away. Emma trembled, the full impact of what might have happened hitting her. Michael placed a protective arm around her shoulders. Are you all right? He asked, his voice laced with concern. She nodded, taking a steadying breath. I'm fine. I just wasn't expecting. Neither was I, Michael replied grimly, but it only strengthens our case. Indeed, Victor's outburst proved disastrous for his defense. The judge ordered him held without bail, citing his clear threat to a key witness. When the trial concluded months later, Victor Sterling received a 13-year sentence for securities fraud, obstruction of justice, and witness intimidation. One evening, as they shared dinner in Catherine's elegant dining room, Emma noticed Michael studying her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "What?" she asked, self-conscious. "I was just thinking," he replied, "about how different my life would be if my mother hadn't gotten lost in that blizzard." "Are you complaining?" Catherine teased. "On the contrary." Michael's eyes never left Emma's. "I'm grateful." Later, as they stood on Catherine's terrace overlooking Central Park, Michael broached the subject that had been hovering between them for weeks. "I want you to consider a position at Reynolds Innovations," he said without preamble, "head of a new ethics and compliance division." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Working for you. Working with me," he corrected. "The division would report directly to the board, not to me. Complete independence." "Why me?" "Because you've proven you won't compromise your principles even when it costs you everything." His voice softened. "And because I trust you." Emma looked out over the park, considering. "It would be complicated. Us, I mean. Everything worthwhile usually is." He moved closer, his shoulder brushing hers. "Emma, I'm not offering you a job because I'm attracted to you. I'm offering because you're the right person for it. The fact that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that night in the diner is a separate issue." She smiled despite herself. "Very compartmentalized of you." "I try." His answering smile made her heart skip. "So what do you say to the job, I mean? The other issue we can discuss later." "I'll think about it." "Fair enough." He hesitated, then added, "And if you do accept, there's one condition." "Which is?" "You keep challenging me the way you did that first night. Someone needs to keep me honest." "I think I can manage that," she replied softly. 6 months after that fateful night at Maple Creek Diner, Emma stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of Michael's penthouse, watching snow drift lazily over Manhattan. The view of Central Park at sunset was breathtaking, painted in shades of gold and crimson, but her attention was on the headline blazing across her tablet: "Sterling Capital Executives Indicted for Securities Fraud." "Quite the milestone," Michael said, joining her at the window. He wrapped his arms around her from behind his chin, resting atop her head. 6 months, Emma mused, leaning back against him. 6 months since a blizzard and a lost mother changed everything. "I'd call that worth celebrating." Michael pressed a kiss to her temple. The past months had been a whirlwind. The evidence in Emma's safe deposit box had proven devastating, not just for Victor, but for an entire network of financial manipulation that had infected multiple firms. The SEC investigation this time had been thorough and uncompromising, thanks in no small part to Michael's influence and resources. Reynolds Innovations had weathered the storm. The company's stock had taken an initial hit when Michael publicly disclosed the fraudulent practices within their partner companies, but his transparency and commitment to reform had ultimately strengthened their position. Investors respected integrity. It turned out, especially when backed by decisive action. Under Michael's leadership, Reynolds Innovations had become a champion for corporate transparency, implementing rigorous ethics protocols that were quickly becoming industry standards. The business press that once criticized him for being ruthless now praised him for his principled stand against fraud. "I still can't believe it's finally over," Emma said, setting down the tablet. 3 years of looking over my shoulder and now justice," Michael finished, "though I'm not sure 13 years in federal prison is enough for what Victor did to you." "It's not about the punishment," Emma replied. "It's about the truth finally being acknowledged." She turned in his arms to face him, "and about reclaiming my life." Michael traced the curve of her cheek with his thumb. "Speaking of which, have you given any more thought to my offer?" After the evidence had been secured and the legal proceedings begun, Michael had offered Emma a position heading up a new ethics and compliance division at Reynolds Innovations. The role would leverage her financial expertise while establishing industry-leading standards for transparent business practices. "I'm still considering it," she replied, though her smile suggested otherwise. "Working for my boyfriend seems complicated." "Then make it uncomplicated." Michael suggested, his tone casual despite the sudden intensity in his eyes. "How exactly would I do that?" "Marry me instead." Michael pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Then I'd be working for my wife, not the other way around. How do you figure that? Emma asked, her voice unsteady as he opened the box to reveal a stunning emerald ring set in platinum. Because you'd own me, heart and soul. His usual confidence wavered slightly. You already do. Emma looked up from the ring to his face, seeing vulnerability there she once thought impossible from the ruthless CEO she'd first met. This is sudden. Is it 6 months of 14-hour days rebuilding my company's ethical framework, together learning to trust again, both of us falling asleep going over SEC, testimony, and waking up in each other's arms? His smile turned wry. Mother says we've been married in all but name since the night of the blizzard. Your mother, Emma Lafayette, is a romantic meddler. My mother, Michael corrected, is never wrong, especially about what's good for me. Emma took the ring box from his hands, studying the emerald. Why not a diamond? Because you're not conventional. You're rare, valuable, and the exact color of your eyes when you were about to challenge me on something ridiculous I've said in a meeting. His smile softened. Also, diamonds remind you of Wall Street, and I wanted something that only reminded you of us. You've thought this through, she said, impressed, despite herself. I'm thorough, he agreed, then added with uncharacteristic uncertainty. Emma, you haven't answered me. She looked up at him, at this man who had transformed from the cold, ruthless AEO to someone who fought for truth and justice alongside her, who had risked his company and reputation to do what was right, who looked at her now not as a conquest or an asset, but as an equal someone to build a life with. Before I answer, she said carefully, I need to know something. If I say yes, am I accepting a job as well as a proposal? Because I'm not sure. The job offer is separate, Michael interrupted. Accept it, decline it, counteroffer. That's business. This, he gestured to the ring, is personal. The only merger I care about right now. In that case, Emma said, slipping the ring onto her finger, I accept. The proposal, that is. The job offer still requires negotiation. Joy transformed Michael's face as he lifted her off her feet in an exuberant embrace. I wouldn't expect anything less. He set her down gently. Name your terms, future Mrs. Reynolds. Oh no, she laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. I'm keeping Collins professionally. You'll have to earn having your name on my office door. Challenge accepted, he murmured against her lips. Later that evening, they celebrated with Catherine at Maple Creek Diner, now under new ownership, Emma's. She had purchased it with part of the substantial settlement she'd received when Sterling Capital's fraudulent practices were exposed. To second chances, Catherine toasted, raising her champagne glass. The diner had been closed for the private celebration, its worn booths and polished counters gleaming with new life, much like its owner. And to blizzards, Michael added with a grin, may they always lead us exactly where we need to be. Even if it's not where we plan to go, Emma finished, her heart full, as she looked between her future husband and the woman who would soon be her mother-in-law. Catherine beamed at them. I knew it from the moment I saw you two together. The way you challenged each other, respected each other. No pretense, no games. Mother, Michael warned good-naturedly, what I'm allowed to be smug. Catherine's eyes sparkled with mischief. He needed someone who saw the man behind the CEO. And you, my dear, needed someone who would stand beside you in the fight, not run from it. As if on cue, the bell above the diner door jingled. They turned to see William Winters, their first customer, from the night of the blizzard, entering with a small wrapped package. Hope I'm not interrupting, he said, approaching their booth. Just heard the news about the engagement and wanted to drop this off. You're always welcome, William, Emma assured him, accepting the gift. Inside was a beautiful hand-carved wooden snowflake. Made it myself, William explained, to remember how it all started. It's perfect, Emma said, genuinely touched. After he left, Michael examined the delicate carving. We should have a winter wedding. Come full circle. In the diner, Emma teased. Why not? Catherine chimed in. It would be uniquely yours. I was joking, Emma protested. I'm not, Michael said thoughtfully. Not entirely. Not about the winter part, at least. There's something poetic about finding our future in the season that brought us together. Emma considered the idea, warming to it despite herself. December, she decided, but not in the diner. The lakeside then, Michael suggested, with the mountains in the background. Cold, Catherine observed. We'll keep each other warm, Michael said, his eyes never leaving Emma's. 1 year later, as December snow dusted the shores of Lake Champlain, Emma Collins became Emma Collins Reynolds in an intimate ceremony witnessed by their closest friends. Catherine, radiant in silver blue, dabbed at tears as they exchanged vows beneath an arch of winter roses and pine boughs. "When I first met you," Michael said, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed gathering, "you challenged everything I thought I knew about success, about worth, about what matters. You stood your ground when it would have been easier to run. You chose truth when lies would have been safer." He squeezed her hands. "I promise to be worthy of that courage every day of our lives together." "When I first met you," Emma replied, her smile teasing, despite the tears in her eyes, "I thought you were the most arrogant man I'd ever encountered." Laughter rippled through the audience. "I wasn't wrong," she continued, "but I discovered that your arrogance was matched by your integrity once you found it again. Your determination by your compassion, your ambition by your capacity for love." Her voice softened. "I promise to remind you of those qualities whenever the world tries to make you forget them again." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, snow began to fall, gentle, pristine flakes that glittered like diamonds in the winter sunlight. A perfect circle, Catherine would later say, a story written in snow and second chances. At the reception, Emma found herself momentarily alone, watching Michael across the room as he laughed with friends. She thought of the journey that had brought them here, from a desperate whistleblower and a ruthless CEO to partners in every sense. "Penny, for your thoughts." Catherine appeared at her side, resplendent in her mother-of-the-groom finery. "Just reflecting on how different my life might have been if you hadn't gotten lost in that blizzard," Emma replied, linking her arm through the older woman's. Catherine's eyes twinkled. "Who says I was lost?" Emma stared at her. "You mean sometimes," Catherine said with a mysterious smile, "a mother knows exactly what her son needs even when he doesn't. You planned it getting stranded at my diner." "Planned is a strong word. Let's say I created an opportunity. The blizzard was just fortunate timing." She touched Emma's hand gently. "I'd been researching Michael's business dealings for months. I found articles mentioning your whistleblowing case against Sterling Capital, though most painted you as the villain. But I recognized the truth when I read between the lines. I knew you were exactly what my son needed. Someone who valued integrity over profit. The taxi driver was very well compensated, I assure you." Before Emma could respond, Michael joined them, sliding his arm around his new wife's waist. "What are you two conspiring about?" "Your mother was just explaining." "How happy I am that you found each other," Catherine interrupted smoothly. "A perfect match, as if fate itself arranged it." "You're a meddling mother," Emma murmured, though her eyes danced with amusement. "What was that, dear?" Catherine asked innocently. "Nothing," Emma laughed, leaning into Michael's embrace. "Just agreeing about fate." As they moved to the dance floor for their first waltz, as husband and wife, Michael pulled her close. "You look like you're keeping a secret," he observed. Emma smiled up at him, snowflakes catching in her lashes. "I'll tell you someday, when we're old and gray and still arguing about ethics violations in board meetings." "Promise," he asked, spinning her beneath the twinkling lights. "Promise," she agreed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering Burlington in a fresh blanket of possibility, a reminder that sometimes the most perfect endings begin with unexpected storms and the courage to shelter someone in need. In the center of the reception table sat Williams, a hand-carved snowflake, now framed in silver, next to a weathered men's watch. John Reynolds' watch, which Michael had worn every day since his father's death. Old and new, past and future loss and discovery, all intertwined in a journey that had begun on the worst night of winter and culminated on the best. The years that followed brought new challenges and triumphs. Emma eventually accepted the position at Reynolds Innovations, transforming the company's ethics practices so thoroughly that they became the gold standard in corporate America. Building on that success, she later founded the Wall Street Whistleblower Protection Fund, providing legal and financial support to those brave enough to stand against corruption. Michael, meanwhile, steered Reynolds Innovations toward becoming the most ethically respected corporation in America. The company's motto, "Integrity before profit," wasn't just a slogan, it was a principle lived daily from the boardroom to the mailroom. And in the years to come, whenever anyone asked Michael Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Innovations, or Emma Collins Reynolds, founder of the Wall Street Whistleblower Protection Fund, how they met, they would simply smile and say, it was fate disguised as a blizzard. Catherine, of course, would just wink and say nothing at all.